book. Who's this guy reading the book?
It's me reading a book. I always bring a book to the cinema. I'm James Rosica, and it's good to see you at the popcorn counter. You can help me carry some of these books into the cinema.
No. I came for popcorn. What book are you reading? Is it like a book that's been made into a film or something like that? Or
Well, incredibly. Did you know that about 50% of all movies are adaptations of pre-existing material? I've just finished reading The Man Who Fell to Earth, actually.
Oh.
By Walter Tevis. Having seen that, so we saw it a couple of weeks ago, and I enjoyed the movie, and I thought, I'm going to read the book. And it's only a thin little book; it's only small, and it was fascinating actually to read the book, having very recently seen the film. Yeah. There are some scenes and elements in the book which are exactly the same in the film, and they've been really slavishly copied. Okay. And there are some things which are extremely different. And I tell you what, there is an awful lot more nudity in the film than there is in the book. Not many people are taking their clothes off in the book, whereas in the film, really, people are hardly ever put clothes on.
Mm-hmm. Alien nudity, as a matter of fact, in the
yes,
film.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
It's just as much alien as human. Fascinating. And what do you think? Was the book better than the film, in your opinion? Or?
I think I can see why the book appealed to be turned into a film. Mm-hmm. I think maybe I enjoyed the film very slightly more, but then the book doesn't have the advantage of David Bowie's charisma.
Yeah,
the book is like a little bit talky and a little bit ploddy, and the book also kind of reads like he had a great sort of first half and then wasn't quite sure how to end the story.
Okay.
So it kind of slightly tapers off, whereas the film, the film ends in a similar way to the book, but it feels somehow a little bit more definitive and confident, I think.
Okay.
So I think it's one of those rare examples where the film is better than the book.
That's interesting. Well, so one of my theories, which was probably passed on to me by one of my first film professors, was absolutely terrible. I'm not going to name names, but he did have a good point. He used to talk about, we're taking a lot of novels and long form books and we're putting them into films, and it just doesn't work. So he said short stories, even magazine articles, little bits of the newspaper, those are better for adaptation than an actual novel is. And I think
a lot of the books that we have seen adapted recently, The Man Who Fell to Earth and Full Metal Jacket and All Quiet on the Western Front, those are all reasonably short books.
Okay.
But not as short as, I know Top Gun was originally adapted from a magazine article, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, exactly.
So the shorter the better, really.
Yeah. So I think a classic example, a pretty good film, I'm not going to say it's a great film, but a great example of a short story is Shawshank Redemption, which is a feature film, of course, but it was a Stephen King, and I'm not a big fan of Stephen King, his standard fare of books, but his short stories are pretty good. And there's one called, I think it's called Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption is the name of the short story, and that's probably a 20-page story or something like that, and turned into a pretty successful film. So it felt like that was for me, that's like the right balance of a short story and being adapted into a film.
The alternative is that you can just take a really tiny bit of a bigger book. Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
I did, for school.
The Philip K. Dick book. Yeah. Right, okay. So now, if I recall correctly, it's a few years since I read it, but I think the film Blade Runner is based on about 6 pages of that book.
Oh, yeah.
And there's all sorts of stuff in the book about artificial animals and the kind of like the main character's struggle to try and impress his neighbors or whatever. Yeah. All sorts of stuff completely thrown away. And there's like 6 pages of kind of detective type action in the middle of the book, and that's what became the film.
It's amazing. That was my favorite part. Was I think it was called Mercerism? Maybe it was this worship of electric sheep. It's called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Because if you're a human, owning an electric sheep was like a sign of, I think, like success and status, exactly. So they kept these sheep on their rooftops. It was awesome. I loved it. It was this absurd element that when I did see the film, I was so disappointed because I thought, where are the electric sheep?
I've only been asked, I think, to rate one adaptation.
Yeah.
But I think that the best strategy I can summarize is to do what Marie Kondo does and throw away as much as you can.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell people to do. Really just try and get rid of it absolutely as much as you can. Keep the little bits that you like.
She's got a great point. And spark joy. If it sparks joy, you keep it. But I mean, you've got to be careful because a lot of what sparks joy is just too happy. You want some difficulty, you want some hardship in your story. So you've got to. It shouldn't necessarily spark joy, but spark some kind of emotional reaction. I guess.
Yeah, spark fascination.
Yeah.
So the book that I was asked to adapt, it was a World War II story about a woman who's an anthropologist working in India with sort of indigenous tribes during the Second World War. And she was asked to kind of gather together these sort of Indian tribesmen into a little sort of task force to try and patrol the jungle and warn the Allies about Japanese troops invading through like the northeast part of India.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be, it has like all sorts of great ingredients there. It's just kind of, it's this kind of young woman, and she's a bit sexy, and she's in this kind of fantastic jungle scenario, and there's a lot of action and a bit of war, and there's a bit of romance. It's all great, but the producers gave me her biography to read, and the book was turgidly boring.
Oh God!
And thankfully, all the stuff that they wanted to film about was like in the first half of the book, so I only read half of it. I didn't even read the second half.
Oh, good.
I just kept reading until we'd finished the bits that they wanted, and then never went back to it. But I did a Marie Kondo there and threw away as much as I could. Have you been asked to do an adaptation before?
No. I mean the Foxy, the Marilyn Monroe thing is sort of a collection of articles that Zesis showed me. He gave me these things and he gave me some ideas, which was nice. But then I read a lot about Marilyn when I was doing it, so I was definitely like looking at biographies about her and Arthur Miller as well, and Joe DiMaggio. So it's not really a strict adaptation, and we're basically verging on fiction most of the time. It's all guesswork. But I read a book called The Shipping News by Yanni Proulx years ago, which I didn't know was going to be made into a film. So I loved the book. I put all this energy into sort of writing an outline, and then Lasse Hallström made the film maybe 2 months after I'd done all my work, and it already came out. And I was really disappointed in the film, and that so often happens, is that you've got this. I think the lesson I learned was that I thought I had all these great ideas for adapting this book that I really liked, and then kind of turned out that it probably wasn't filmable. And again, there's so much happening in a novel, and you have to Maria Kondo it all out, and it was hard for me to do, and it was hard for me to watch. I think the tone was wrong in the Hallström film too, but it ended up being pretty good film, and it was pretty well received, but not one of his masterpieces. So,
and that film's got Kevin Spacey in, hasn't it? Which means that it'll sort of be consigned to the bin of history then, won't it?
No, yep. But also, who else is in there? Isn't it? Great English actress, Dame, one of your dames, Jimmy. Oh God,
Dame Judi Dench.
Judi Dench, thank you so much, Dame Judi Dench. Yes, I mean, I think for me, the classic one growing up was To Kill a Mockingbird, which is really kind of this racist white savior piece that we read in school. So everyone knew the book, and then it turns out, on cable television, the 1963 version of the film would come up. And so actually in the last couple of years, I went back and reread the book again, because we've actually banned it in a lot of schools here, because it's just it's really
actually my daughter has just done that book like last year at school. So it's still, it lives on in Britain.
It's lost some favor here, and so I watched both, and I wasn't as impressed with the film, but I think it is in terms of like taking a novel and really capturing the good parts and telling a good story, it does a really nice job. So it's still kind of, to me, even though I'm not that fond of either book or film as much as I used to be, I think it's kind of the gold standard of books to film.
And the other kind of anecdote that I would kind of think about when talking about adaptations is this story about Aphex Twin, who's like the British sort of electronic musician. Mm-hmm. And there's this kind of famous story. There's all sorts of apocryphal, crazy, ridiculous stories about him. But one of the many apocryphal stories is that, like midway through his career, he was trying to make some cash doing remixes of other people's records. Yeah. And he'd been asked to do a remix of a Radiohead song and completely forgotten that he'd been asked to do it until one day a courier turned up at his house and said, "Oh, I've come to pick up that remix." And he goes, "Oh, completely forgotten to do it. So he just told the courier, right, just wait there for a minute and I'll go inside and get it. And he went upstairs and he just ran off a tape of whatever he happened to be working on that day.
Wow.
And gave it to the guy, and the guy just drove off. So I think this went out as a Radiohead B-side, but it contained utterly nothing of Radiohead whatsoever. It was just something that he happened to have on a tape nearby. And I think if you are ever asked to do an adaptation, I would try and take that strategy as well.
Yeah.
Kind of ask the producers very clearly, how much do you know about the material, so you can get an idea of how much you can get away with not including.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. You can't be too faithful. I see that again and again. Is that if you're too faithful to the source material, you're really jeopardizing the final outcome of the film.
There's feels like you've seen all these books that I'm carrying here. There's a reason why books are books and movies are movies.
Exactly.
And trying to bridge one into the other is asking for trouble.
And if we keep chattering along, we're not going to get in and see this film.
Right, we need to get in and see the film.
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah. You carry these books. I'll take these ones. They can run some popcorn on top. Stop complaining.
Shorter books, short stories, man.